Beneath the hum of the stasis field, the warlord of the Vorashi Syndicate wept. He was not bleeding. Raxxus, commander of 10,000 warships, shrank into the cold metal of the reinforced tribunal chair, begging for a mercy he would never receive. A human stood over him, perfectly still, having dismantled an empire without firing a single shot. You'll want to hear exactly how the Syndicate fell. Trust me, the real weapon wasn't the fleet. The bruise on Gideon Hale's jaw had barely faded to yellow. 3 days after the diplomatic summit at Tarn, his outpost fractured the galaxy, V.A. Allen, chief scribe of the Interspecies Tribunal, had recorded the exact decibel of the physical impact. Here Raxxus had struck the human envoy with enough kinetic force to shatter synthetic bone. Gideon had collapsed heavily against the polished obsidian floor. 6 Vorashi guards immediately stepped forward, their secondary neck mandibles flaring outward in a synchronized display of apex dominance. The human simply knelt there upon the stone. With agonizing slowness, he adjusted his left cufflink. V. Allen documented the trembling motion in the official ledger as a mammalian flinch response. It looked like a pathetic attempt to regain composure while surrounded by absolute predators. Rising to his feet, the Terran completely ignored the towering warlord looming above him. Gideon reached into his jacket and retrieved a perfectly pressed, monogrammed pocket square. He dabbed the vivid crimson blood from his split lip with clinical detachment. The mundane civility of the gesture felt absurd. The Terran coalition formally recognizes this unprovoked assault, Gideon stated. His voice remained a calm murmur against the cavernous acoustics of the summit hall. He did not yell, nor did he signal for his security detail to draw their weapons. He simply folded the ruined silk square into precise mathematical thirds and looked directly into Raxxus's primary eyes. You'll have 72 hours to unconditionally surrender your armada and submit to tribunal judgment. After that grace period expires, we consider this a state of total war. Echoed through the cavernous space the clicking laughter of the entire Vorashi delegation. The 72-hour ultimatum, the Syndicate ignored entirely. To a culture forged strictly in the heat of orbital combat, a demand for a legal hearing represented the ultimate admission of cowardice. D.A. Allen cataloged the human's quiet threat as empty, desperate rhetoric. If a species lacked the physical strength to retaliate instantly, the universe dictated they deserved whatever destruction naturally followed. The scribe assumed the Terrans were merely delaying their inevitable extinction. Tarn's outpost transformed into a staging ground overnight. The Vorashi dreadnought known as the Orion's Blade positioned its massive silhouette directly above the atmospheric rings, blocking out the local sun. Allen observed the tactical sensor feeds from the safety of the scribe's gallery. The alien clerks moved the fabric of his judicial robes, settling in to record the predictable mathematics of a one-sided slaughter. When the countdown reached 0, no Terran warships breached the atmosphere. Not a single kinetic strike registered on the early warning grids. Nothing. Instead, the void itself began to screen. The massive electronic warfare fields, generating highly localized gravitational disruptions, slammed into the armada. Allen watched as the orbital telemetry feeds went completely dark. The Orion's Blade drifted, utterly paralyzed. On the bridge, Hale, a 70-cycle-old veteran under Raxxus's fiercely loyal second-in-command, stared at the dead consoles. Slowly, the old warrior unbuckled his ceremonial chest plate. The heavy armor clanged against the deck plating. He wept, mourning not his impending death, but the sudden, terrifying obsolescence of his entire warrior culture. The fleet had been neutered by math. Bring him to the chair. 72 hours earlier, Gideon's words at the summit had been a legal technicality. Now, they were an absolute mandate. The tribunal chamber on Earth smelled faintly of ozone and polished wood. V.A. Allen sat at the scribe's desk, obsessively aligning his metallic date a stylus parallel to the wooden edge. Order needed to be maintained. The heavy doors opened. They dragged Raxxus into the room. He wore no armor. The warlord's secondary neck mandibles twitched uselessly. Gideon stood behind the prosecution desk, his posture relaxed, his hands empty. A cold blue light, humming at a frequency that set V. Allen's teeth on edge, pulsed from a collar locked around the alien's throat. It was a molecular stasis tether, A device VAL unclinically noted in the ledger as a localized time dilation field designed to freeze the nervous system upon command. This was the moment. The scribe finally understood the human's demand. The tribunal wasn't a delayed tactic. It wasn't an admission of weakness. It was a deliberate, agonizing extraction of honor. The humans didn't want to kill the warlord. They wanted to domesticate him. For the unprovoked assault on a diplomatic envoy, Gideon began, his voice devoid of anger, and for the mobilization of a hostile fleet in sovereign space. Raxxus strained against the tether. A guttural growl vibrated through the chamber. He wanted to die fighting. He wanted the orbital bombardment, the fire, the glorious end of a conqueror. Gideon adjusted his collar. The stasis tether glowing blue around the screaming warlord's throat. This tribunal sentences you to 100 standard years of solitary confinement within the Sol 3 penal system. The warlord froze. The color drained from his primary eyes. 100 years in a cage, to a species whose maximum lifespan barely exceeded 80 cycles. It wasn't just a life sentence. It was an eternity of waking death. Bureaucracy. Weaponized. He dropped to his knees. The warlord of the Vora, she syndicate wept, his massive frame shrinking into the reinforced tribunal chair, begging for an execution he would never receive. Gideon Hale looked down at the broken conqueror, the bruise on his jaw, a fading memory against the absolute victory of his law. Justice is louder than the human said. Months later, the Tarna's outpost remained quiet. VAL sat in the empty tribunal chamber, the data stylus long since put away. Dust motes drifted through the shafts of artificial light. At the center of the room sat the reinforced tribunal chair. The thick armrests bore the deep, ragged gouges of Vorashi claws. The fire, desperate marks of a 10,000-year reign, securely fastened to the floor.